If you owned an Amiga or Atari ST in the 80s or 90s, you are probably familiar with the rivalry between the two companies as they battled it out for ultimate market share. Both machines had similarities: the same Motorola 68000 CPU, built-in floppy disk drive, graphical user interface, and 2 game ports. The Amiga had its custom chips, and the ST, well, it had MIDI. Many of the games were ported from one system to another and didn't always take advantage of their individual capabilities. You may have heard the term ST port mentioned if you were an Amiga user. This basically meant that the game was ported directly across but failed to utilize the Amiga's blitter and copper chips, for example. Both systems have 2 game ports, and there were many multiplayer games. Bringing your Amiga or ST over to your friend's house, plugging in 2 joysticks, and playing 2-player sensible soccer or 2-player speedball was commonplace. Some games even allowed you to link up 2 systems together via a null modem cable. 2-player Populous, anyone? Yep, with 2 Amigas or STs you could accomplish this, and it worked well. I have fond memories of playing null modem link games with my friends. Stunt Car Racer was one that we played for hours. Now, one thing that's very interesting to me in 2017 is that there's no concept of crossplay between consoles. In other words, if you have a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox or a Nintendo Switch, there's no way you can actually connect a game between any of those 3 systems, unfortunately. And it's very surprising to me, considering the fact that PlayStation 4 and Xbox One are exactly the same architecture under the hood. In fact, the chips are almost identical. The only real differences are the underlying kernel and firmware that actually drives these consoles specifically. But if you took both systems apart, you would find that the hardware underneath is almost identical. So what does this mean? Well, if you wanted to play something like Overwatch in 2017 with your friends, and you had an Xbox and your friends had a PlayStation or used PlayStation Network, unfortunately the only recourse you have is to buy a PlayStation and play with your friends that way. There's no cross-network play between the 2 systems. So if we go back to the Amiga and the ST, back in those days there's certainly no type of certification process that developers had to follow in order to get their games published. In fact, developers can be as innovative as they wanted to be when building their games, and in some instances games were developed that actually supported cross-platform network play between the Amiga and the Atari ST. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can accomplish this. First thing we need is both an Atari ST and an Amiga computer. I'm using my 1040 ST and my Amiga 1200 for this exercise, but a stock A500 and 520 ST works just fine. Now you need a null modem serial cable. These are pretty cheap, about $5 to $10 on eBay. Make sure you get a 25-pin female to female connector. Then plug one end of it into the serial port of the Atari ST and the other end into the serial port of the Amiga, and that's it, you're ready to go. Lotus 2 by Magnetic Fields is considered one of the best games on the Amiga and ST. It proved that these machines could do Outrun-style arcade races on standard hardware, especially considering how poor the official port of Outrun was. Lotus 2 can be linked up with crossplay between the ST and the Amiga, and you can have up to 4 players racing on 2 different machines. Pretty impressive. I reached out to developer Sean Southern and asked him what the thinking behind this was. All our games worked on Amiga and ST as we wrote in machine code for speed, and it was the same code on each, so very few changes to make the ST version. We always did the Amiga one first, then changed what was necessary for the ST. The Amiga had the blitter, of course, so as they both had serial ports, there was no problem connecting them, and I guess enough friends had one Amiga and ST between them, so there was certainly no reason not to make them work with each other. I guess it just happened. I also asked why the cross-platform play was missing in the sequel Lotus 3. He says he or his partner on the game, Andrew Morris, must have taken it out, but they don't remember why. Now, if I were to guess, I would say it was probably due to time or disk or memory constraints. Lotus 3 was a more ambitious game with more tracks and the option to create your own, more cars, music, and subsequently it came on 2 floppy disks as opposed to 1. Battle Chess by Interplay is a chess game that was released in 1988. It's another game that supports cross-platform play. I set up a network game between the ST and Amiga to battle it out to the death. To set this up, just select modem game on each machine, then pick who is red and blue, and sit back and watch. An average chess game can easily take over an hour, so let's revisit this game later in the video and see who the ultimate winner was. Battle Chess is one game that supports cross-platform play with many different machines, including the Amiga, ST, IBM PC, Apple II, Apple IIgs, and Mac. Battle chess tournaments are something I'd heard about, and I reached out to a gentleman by the name of Peter Fletcher. He runs a tournament with all 6 machines hooked up via null modem cables. He calls it the Tournament of Micros, and he hosted it at VCF earlier this year. This was a tournament between all 6 machines battling it out to the death. What an amazing idea! His tournament took place over 2 separate days. On day 1, the IBM PC was victorious, and on day 2, the Apple IIgs was the winner. So how does cross-platform play work on machines like the Apple II or IBM PC that have different architecture to the Amiga? Well, it's simple. Chess is a game with a standard notation. For example, if we have a pawn at position B3, and we want to move it to position B4, all we need to do is send that command to move pawn B3 to B4 to the other machine. The machine then waits for the move, interprets it, and executes it. Populous and Populous 2 by Bullfrog are classic games that also support cross-platform play. Just go into the options menu, select data link, and who is good versus who is evil, and press connect. Like Battle Chess, you can host a computer versus computer match and sit back and watch. Stunt Car Racer by Jeff Crammond is probably the most well-known game with null modem link-up between the ST and Amiga. This is a fun game to play with a friend. Now I should also mention there are more titles that support cross-platform play with the ST, including RVF Honda, Hard Driving, Powermonger, Vroom, and a few others. So in conclusion, while there are only a small handful of games that took advantage of this feature, the fact that cross-platform play was even thought about and coded back in the 90s is definitely a welcome addition. Oh, and before I go, let's see who won the battle chess duel between the Amiga and the ST.
You made a fair move.
Sorry, Amiga fans, while it was a gallant battle, the ST emerged victorious. Maybe next time. Now, before I go, I wanted to give a big thank you to Sean Southern, the developer of Lotus 1, 2, and 3 on the ST and the Amiga. He was very, very helpful and answered some of my questions, so thank you very much, Sean. And as always, guys, if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Give me that thumbs up, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye for now. Okay. How well does this look? Between a Xbox and a... So unfortunately, so what does this mean? Well, now if you guys follow modern day consoles, you know what Xbox and PlayStation is.